Welcome to The Growth Project, a podcast brought to you by AMPLOS. We are live today with a unique opportunity. We don't get enough of these, but I'm joined not just by Dr. Milt Lowder, Dr. Cory Shaffer is with us today as well. Welcome to the show, everybody. But we try to get together, and this time of year, it's an exciting time of year for a number of reasons. One of those, and I know that in our listening population, we've got some people that care about college football. We are grateful to work with some programs that are, I think, relevant in that space. Milt with the Clemson Tigers, Cory with the Oregon Ducks, and myself with the Georgia Bulldogs. So Cory, it's an exciting time of year. We're on the other side of week one, and so we have just enough data to start reacting to it. Right, just enough data to start reacting to it. So, what coming away from week one, as we get into this conversation, what are some of the irons in the fire? Would you say?
Well, I think the question that I often get from people who know that this is what we do. We work in this industry. We work in this space. So we're involved with these programs, and it's amazing when you just watch games with other people. They're always looking to you to sort of want to know, what's your reaction to this? As you watch the game, how do you feel about that? But now coming after, week one is in the books, probably three very different perspectives coming out of week one for each of us sitting here. And I think that's what people are probably interested to hear from us is just, okay, now what? Yeah. So you've got one in the books, all off season built up for our programs, all the work that's done through the summer and into camp. Now you actually get to play against a team in a different colored uniform. You got one in the win column or the loss column. And so how does our job change based off of reaction from week one? Yeah. So I think that will be the purpose of today's conversation. And I think our listeners will probably enjoy hearing some of that perspective from us. But
yeah, because I'll toss this in here too as a final comment on that we are on the other side of week one, and it hit me on Friday of last week. I was in Athens, and I'd spoken to our team, and then following me was a certain meeting, and then after that, everybody broke in to go to their unit meetings, and so I came out of the team room and walked around the corner to basically where the dining area is, and so it was a total ghost town. No one's there. Everyone's in their meetings. It's just totally quiet. And it just got me thinking, and I was like, man, it is incredible how much time is spent all year long just building up to these 15 days. And how many months have gone into preparing for that one day. And you think about it, you're literally spending, I don't know, I'd have to run the numbers, 90-something% of your year just building toward somewhere between 12, 13, 14, if you're lucky, 15 days of the year. And it's so unique, the amount that goes. And so now here we are on the other side of week one. And so naturally, given that you only get a few of these, there's a whole lot of reaction.
Well, you already tipped your hand. Your first thing you said was these 15 days. So you're already banking on 15 of them.
I said 12, 13, 15 minutes.
We got our 12. I'll be happy with 13, 14. But Drew's nah, we got 15.
I would love 15.
Milt, you've been doing it longer than us. Yeah. So what are your just observations after having done this for so long? How do people typically come out of just week one?
Yeah, week one, we have not gotten off to the best start in the last 4 years. I think we've lost 3 of our last 4 openers. Mm-hmm. And we talk about all the time that paradigm pathway. I can't help but think about Edison. There's an event, there's a reaction, there's a response, and there's growth. And so that automatic human reaction, when you don't accomplish what you want to accomplish, how do you handle that reaction? How do you handle that emotion when you don't play the way you want to play? And it's really hard to predict that was going to be the outcome. And so I think what we talk about a lot of times, the art of what we do, the art of driving peak performance is knowing when to add pressure, knowing when to take it away. Knowing when to focus on the brutal truth and knowing when to find reasons to believe and tempering that somewhere in the middle. And I think what you always want to balance, at least what I've tried to do, is the role that we play what's the message, or how do we keep our finger on the pulse of encouraging our coaches? Because our coaches right now are probably getting very little encouragement. And also making sure our players still find reasons to believe. Build on the foundations. I think this is what's been fun to watch the work you guys have both done over the years. Building on the foundation. How do you continue to stay true to who you are? If we believe success, my very first moment with Milt in 2009 was, how are we going to define success at Clemson? And that worthy pursuit of a worthy goal, not achieving the goal. And I think that frames our conversation. You guys achieved the goal. You won the opener. We didn't achieve the goal. So how do we redefine success and failure right now in this moment?
Yeah. So backtrack for a second. You got ahead there just a bit. So coming out of week one, y'all faced off, which has to be a cool moment. And we documented that on social media and everything. One of you's on the positive end of that. One of you is not. I probably sit somewhere in between. Oregon won, but they played an FCS opponent that they were favored by 43 points, and they won by 10. And it was a 3-point game in the fourth quarter. So you get the positive outcome, right? But I think everybody inside that building knows that did not play a great game and a lot to improve upon and so on. So let's just first start with, I think, the normal reaction, okay, for you guys, and we can hear from each of you. Coming out of week one, so Drew, positive reaction, I guess, from the fan base, probably from inside the building as well. Like coaches and players felt pretty good about the showing against Clemson. How do you now navigate that going into week 2 and beyond?
Well, I think positive reaction for sure. One of the things that I'm happy about as it pertains to college football, though, that I think is really good for the sport and good for the psychology of the sport is I think opening games, they matter less now maybe than ever. And I think that's great. It's really hard. It's really hard to play well and play consistently in week 1. I think we would all attest to that. It's just tough to do it. And so I think with the change in the playoff and all that, I think it just makes for so much of a better, because that game really doesn't matter a whole lot.
Oh.
It doesn't matter a ton to us. It doesn't matter a ton to you guys. Any and every goal Clemson has in Central Georgia is still within reach, which is great.
Yes.
I think everybody's had the experience before in the old system where if you lose a certain game or get disrespect, you just kind of know it's over, and this of having a chance still. And that's just a super unhealthy psychological place to be.
Yeah.
It's so bad, and it's so bad for everybody. So yeah, there's a positive reaction, but I think that everybody's level-headed enough, I would imagine, on both sides of that outcome to realize, you know what, it's not make or break in any way, and I think that's a real positive. So yeah, we're coming away seeing things that feel good about, and things that we want to be better at. But I think there's not an overreaction.
That's coming from you, though.
Yeah, easier for me to say that.
Yeah, exactly, right.
Totally agree.
And I would argue the coaches probably have a similar reaction. The players are the ones who are most likely to succumb to the positive.
Yeah,
for sure. The positives coming out of hey, we beat a good team.
Yeah.
We're great. So how do you temper that?
I think that if you're trying to temper that in a reactionary type way, that can be really, really tough. I think the answer is that's tempered 360-something days a year by just the tempo that's set and the pulse that's created about how we think about good and bad, how we think about success, and how we define failure. Just a real short-term, it's cliched, I hate to say it, but that's not anything that's new that to be talking about that following a victory is what those guys hear all the time.
Yeah, so just help our listeners understand, turn the page now to week 2. What does that look like? Just business as usual, right back into rhythm and routine of the week?
Yeah. Exactly. I think it's just what it always is. It's an off day Sunday with recovery and treatment if you need it. And it's coming in today, today's Tuesday now, coming in yesterday to do what we would always do of break it down and see what needs to be better and go to work.
Okay. And Milt, on the other side of this, and you started down this path, so let's come back to that. On the losing end of it, the reaction from fans, especially media, whoever, more likely to be negative. And obviously there's nuance to that given how the game went, right? Had it been a 34-31 type game, it'd probably be very different. But given how the score ended up and probably looked a whole lot more lopsided than it maybe it was on, on film. But now what for Clemson?
Yeah, I think where you think about where Georgia sits, we always talk about the freedom and privilege you get to make decisions and prove from a position of strength to a position of weakness.
Yeah.
And so for Georgia, I have to imagine that was a very affirming, confirming, hey, our process worked, our game plan worked, we executed. For us, the mentality, I haven't taught, I kind of messaged with our coaches, haven't talked to our team yet. To me, it's a little bit of a position of weakness, a little bit of doubt. And that's where you got to really find that internal battle, asking those questions. Have we got the right people on the bus in the right seats? Are we putting them in a position? Where were some of those breakdowns that we saw? And hoping that we have answers and solutions for that. And that overreaction, which can be that 1 week, is Drew. I mean, we spent all spring with this team getting ready to play, having a plan to win, focusing on our process, giving great effort. I haven't watched the effort tape yet, but there may be a couple places where that broke down. And so part of that reaction is, okay, what can our response be? And what I encouraged our coaches yesterday is, what's the brutal truth? And the brutal truth is, at least for this 1 point, this data point in time, we didn't play the way we wanted to play. We didn't compete for 60 minutes or as long as it takes. We didn't respond to when Georgia turned up the heat and the momentum. We didn't respond to that. But one swallow doesn't make a summer. And so not making sure you throw out all the good in that overreaction. I think what's really interesting with college football right now and Coach Swinney's stance of how he still wants to build the program and developmental program, investing in our high school players, still doing it this way, that's going to be one of the greatest challenges because that's all the narrative and the outside noise that he can't be successful, we can't be successful doing it this way. And I think a lot of people, from what everybody is saying, is making a referendum on his philosophy around coaching. And that steadfast belief, how do you balance that steadfast belief and how do you continue to believe in that? A lot of it is I admire and respect what we're trying to do. But it's even more so back to an inside-out approach. How do we get back to this? How can we get better today? And what will progress look like this Saturday?
Yeah. I want to, you mentioned the track record here recently, and I'm just curious because I think this is probably something our listeners might be interested to hear. Does it feel different to lose to Georgia, who has won a couple national championships here in recent years, preseason number 1? You go back to last year, the start of the 2023 season, to lose to Duke. Does it feel different? Is the message different? Like, those are the nuances, I think, from year to year in this case. But still just one game, one sample size,
yeah.
Right? Does it feel different?
Well, I think what was interesting going into it, obviously we weren't the favorite. Now we didn't succumb to that, but the pressure was kind of on Georgia. Last year we were, I imagine, heavily favored. I have to go back and look at it. And it's so easy to look at last year's game and see where we beat ourselves.
Yeah.
And so that, hey guys, just don't lose to Clemson. It's a mantra we talk about all the time. Last year it's really easy we lost to Clemson. This game, I don't mean like the second half is pretty easy. We didn't lose to Clemson. Like there were some missed opportunities. We missed some momentum, some ifs and buts along the way. But it was pretty evident you guys took control of that game. And there's some things that we didn't help Clemson. So I would say that was the biggest piece where we really felt like last year against Duke, we really beat ourselves. We kept fumbling, couldn't finish in the red zone. This time we just couldn't gain the momentum.
Yeah, and I wanted to point that out just because I don't know, I maybe for fans or listeners to understand, like not all wins and losses are created equal.
Yeah.
And the nuances of every single one and how the game plays out and what it looks like all of those things influence our role in our job and how we sort of go about it in that next week. And so I wanted to point that out because I think that's important.
What's really good, and we could all learn from college football, like we can't sit there and worry about Georgia today. Like we kick off on Saturday night against 8 o'clock against App State, who's gonna they're seeing an opportunity.
Yeah.
They're seeing, and they're a really good football team. And if we spend our time kind of reflecting too much on the past, and so one of the things for all of our programs, you guys won, guess what? You've already flipped the script. You guys maybe didn't play. We already flipped the script. We got a whole new game plan, a whole new level of messaging. But that routine, the good and bad of life, we talk about when things happen, which you're unprepared for, is that life goes on. And so where we're going and who we are becoming, it's much more important than where we've been or what we didn't accomplish.
Mm-hmm. Hey, the one thing I was going to add that I didn't mention earlier too about the positive reaction is that helps us in this situation is, we didn't win last year. Obviously, we came up short. We don't have many guys that are playing a big role for us right now who also played a big role in our most recent national championship team. And so there aren't as many guys as you might think in that building who have really kind of been there and done that before. Mm-hmm. So that helps tremendously.
Yeah.
I mean, those guys are hungry. Like some of those guys watched the national championship game. They had the same seat I did that day on the sideline. But most of the guys who we're really counting on now got very few reps.
But what you have to be careful with that, because we've talked about this with our soccer program as well, is who we won the national championship last year, is making sure that this year's team, they hadn't really earned anything yet.
Yeah.
Like week one is not a referendum that you've earned, like the national entitlement is running through Georgia, the national championship or through Oregon. Same thing for our team. Like this, you got to earn it. Right now, we've earned 0-1. You've earned 1-0. But I think what you're trying to temper is that entitlement that can creep in. We played for 2 out of the last 3 national championships, or our soccer team has won this, or when we were always in the playoffs. You got to fight that entitlement that could lead to complacency.
Mm-hmm.
So what about the Ducks? Like we were talking about this a little earlier today. So the spread was 40 plus, and they're up by a field goal with 7 minutes to go in the game.
Something along those lines, yeah.
And so I think it's interesting though. So from a reaction standpoint, is there more value in that type of win? I kind of contrast that to you look at what Alabama did to Western Kentucky and what Ole Miss did to Furman, and there's plenty of other examples this weekend. Like we're talking about landslide victories, of course. Like where do we think there's more value when it comes to like reacting to the win?
Well, ultimately, the value is created by the response.
Yeah.
So as long as the response is effective, then there's definitely more value in the game that we played on Saturday.
Uh-huh.
And I appreciated seeing some of the videos on social media and that kind of stuff coming out after Saturday's game. Coach Lanning's messaging was just on point to the team. His demeanor to the media after the game, you knew exactly what was on his mind, and it was one that just disappointment, not that necessarily like, hey, we should have won by 40, but just we did not play to the standard that we try to set for ourselves.
That is worth repeating, because I think that's, even though Georgia beat us, that's the message that we, Coach Smart, Coach Swinney, Coach Lanning, always, the disappointment is not in the outcome. It's more of how you showed up and how you competed and how you played.
Yeah, and he noted, he said, look, we're never, like, we're always going to celebrate, wins because they are hard to come by. It doesn't matter who the opponent is. But there's disappointment in the process.
Yeah.
Because it's not representative of the kind of team that we believe that we are and are trying to ultimately become. So I appreciated seeing some of that after the game. And ultimately, yeah, Drew, I think in the long run, then this can be a good thing. It can be a really good thing. My expectation would be that, this Saturday for us, Saturday night, sort of a throwback to Pac-12 After Dark. It's going to be a 10 p.m. kick here on the East Coast. We're in the Big Ten, but you can't shake some things, I guess.
Who do you have Saturday?
Boise State.
Okay.
Right, so a good program, one that a lot of people have projected to be that team from the group of 5 to find their way to the playoff. A program that's made some noise in college football in the last 10 or 15 years. And I think our guys will be on high alert. Like there will be a little bit more intensity, a little bit more juice, probably, hopefully a little bit more focus than there was this past week. And my expectation would be a really, really positive response. Because coming out of it, again, it's like, hey, we won, but there's nothing but negative reaction.
Yeah.
So that's what's interesting, right? It's like, it's almost, hey, remove the outcome from this. If you look at the reaction from the head coach to the players to the fans and media, like it's not good. I read a tweet earlier, like Oregon's on fraud watch up there with like Florida State, who's now 0-2,
So let's stick with that for 1 second. This would never happen, but wouldn't this be fascinating? Is we know that appropriate levels of stress are good for us, like eustress, right? So like we want a certain degree of stress that's measured often through cortisol. And like if you guys had won 59-0, and we had measured cortisol on Monday morning, and everybody comes walking into the building, I wonder what that number would look like relative to what it would have looked like had we done that Monday, winning 24-14. And I think that to me that highlights the value of winning that way. Like I guarantee you, they walked in with a different kind of mindset, a different kind of demeanor and approach yesterday than they would have if you won 59-0.
I know the players, most importantly, I think from this is knowing how the players responded. And so I know that there was like a player-led team meeting.
Okay, cool.
Right? And that's the kind of eustress that you're talking about. Like they feel the sense of urgency, and so they're addressing it right out of the gate, like, hey, and whatever was talked about in this meeting, I'm sure along the lines of like, hey, we've got to be better.
Yep.
And I think that's really positive. Any opportunity like that where the players are stepping up and taking a little bit more ownership is probably a good thing.
Yep.
And that would not happen at 59-0.
And those are the best teams we've been a part of, is that internal leadership. So eustress, cortisol, but too much shuts down the learning centers of the brain, shuts down that. And so I think that's what we have to be mindful at Clemson, that if our overreaction is we have to, we need to, we should, we can't, then that's going to shut down your ability to play better and be better. And so your interpretation of a loss, the healthy amount of stress, dials a team in, takes ownership, more responsibility, more accountability, improving from a position of strength. Mm-hmm. Drew, you're having to kind of fight that entitlement a little bit, fight that hubris that may creep in, where we're saying, okay, we got to find that balance to face the brutal truth without breaking down our team, without breaking down their confidence, that making sure we find reasons to believe in ourselves and in each other.
Well, and at least what we've tried to do at Oregon, Coach Lanning always uses the phrase, go to the doctor. I know they talk about this at Georgia as well. Yeah. But the good thing is that's where I guess I get to have a little bit of a say in what that looks like. And so every week that starts with, like, let's hunt the good stuff first.
Yeah.
Like we've talked about on the podcast many times before, but even though it was not to our standard, let's make sure that we are reminded of the reasons that we do have to believe.
Yes.
Because there are going to be some guys sitting in film the past couple of days just getting crushed. Mm-hmm. And they need to know that they are still a good football player, and that they did some good things even in this one game, in this one sample. Then we can get to, all right, let's look at what needs work and how are we going to get better this week.
Yeah.
And that's where we talk a lot about, and what I sent the coaches yesterday was evaluation versus criticism. And what I think and what we try to teach is that criticism really stifles creativity. It limits growth. It becomes a personal attack. Evaluation done well helps separate who you are from what you do. And I think that's what we really want to fight at Clemson, because we start attacking the player and create that lack of confidence. It's hard to respond, and from that, because you start painting an image of who they don't want to be and who they may think they are, instead of kind of reminding them of the good.
And I think on that note, we got to acknowledge too, it's really difficult from a player perspective to do that well these days, because the input source of the coach is just one of many.
Yes.
One of many. And I think there was a time and place in sports, I don't know exactly how many years, but I'll just say years ago, where that coach was the most influential voice is from an input standpoint. You didn't always like that anymore. And I think we've talked about, that's probably a whole other conversation, of the access to the psyche of players.
Yes.
These days compared to prior generations. But when something like that transpires on Saturday, whether it's good or bad for any team, the input sources are vast.
And what you have to be careful, those input sources, is not only the negative ones on the social media, but the positive ones, maybe the parent or the agent now, or somebody telling them how great they are, and what they should be getting, or hey, you should be getting this. And so now it becomes a very stressful piece. We know things that we know that break stress is doing something together. And so if you're having these input sources about what you deserve or what you should get, or it's not your fault, we don't take ownership, that's where you can see and disrupt a team very quickly.
And the last thing I'll say about that is they aren't always well educated or well informed input sources that are getting the ear of players.
Well, I had a chance on that radio show this morning, with all the fans and all the negativity, talk about that. It's like, well, I know maybe while you're going to church on Sunday or enjoying your Labor Day weekend, guess what our coaches were doing?
Yeah.
Like our coaches probably didn't go to bed on Saturday night. They were watching film. And they were up there meeting on Sunday, and they were creating a game plan and response. And so they've earned the right. They know more about it than you. But you're right, their voice is diminished.
Yeah, and I always say, as much as you, whoever you are, want to win this game, I promise you they want to win more.
Yeah.
They're giving more to this than you are.
And they know more.
Yeah.
And they've seen more.
They're trying hard.
And it doesn't mean, it's why we love the game, because our fans are so passionate, win or lose.
I think the only other thing that I'll add to here is I think from where we sit, what I'm always interested in is, like, I don't want us to be playing our best football the first weekend in September, right? I want us to be playing our best football through the meat of the season, and especially late in the season when we start getting towards conference championships, and then hopefully Drew's already penned in Georgia. But when we get to the playoff and that kind of thing,
you got to plant the seed. I mean, you got to prepare for success as much as failure.
So, man.
I love that.
But that's what I try to be mindful of. Remind myself. Remind the coaching staff. Remind the players is. So in terms of reaction or response, what we want to see is a step forward. We want to see growth. Are we making less of those same mistakes in week 2 and week 3? And of course, if you can, progressively improve and sort of try to meet that standard and still get the outcome, that's best case scenario.
Yeah. Y'all are in a good spot.
We're in a good spot. You got a chance
to get better.
But to me, that's what's most important is, can we see a big step forward on Saturday? And that's more representative of, like, all right, the guys responded well and we're headed in the right direction.
Yeah. And I would just add this too, to this conversation of reaction amongst any team is almost always going to be moderated by, I would say, the quality of the leadership. And so you think about, like, why is it real important and worthwhile throughout the course of a calendar year to really be thoughtfully investing in your leaders?
Yes.
It's one form of kind of preloading or preparing for things like this. Yeah. Why is it worthwhile to spend time investing in leaders if we're talking about the college football calendar, January through August? Well, guess what? We just found out on Saturday why it's so important.
Especially for us. That's why you guys in the leadership development, knowing your players, knowing what motivates them, getting them to come together and create that chemistry, because tough times can tie you together or tear you apart.
Yeah.
And so without that foundation and fabric, everybody it's easy for our defense to say, hey, we kept you in the game. Well, and so if our team is not connected in a common purpose and a common goal, then you're starting to fight internally.
Yeah.
Which is, Abraham Lincoln's great quote is, we'll never be destroyed from the outside. If we falter and lose our freedoms, because we destroyed ourselves. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the part that I really want to see from our team. Can we stay together? Mm-hmm. We have a common purpose. We're on the same team. Here are the core values. Let's get back to following our plan to win. Let's get back to playing for 60 minutes. Let's give great effort, be more physical, be more aggressive. That's the response that I really want to see from our team.
Yeah, it's got to come. I mean, like, as much time as players spend listening to coaches day in and day out, if you're relying strictly on your coaches to try to get that message through, it's just not going to work very well because they tune them out.
Yeah, and that internal leadership.
Right, that's got to be the
yes, and I think that's what I love. You guys are able to invest in those leaders. So what's the messaging this week then? We got 3 different reactions. We got 3 different opportunities for a response. How are you helping craft the message for Georgia and Oregon this week?
We're focused. I mean, this will sound.
Y'all didn't get the national championship trophy after Saturday. Y'all didn't.
So I mean, we're focused on growth this week.
Good.
Trying to get better. And I think that's important too. I mean, we have the game we have Saturday. I mean, we could.
Who do you have?
Tennessee Tech. You could always lose a game, but it's probably more of an Idaho type matchup like what you guys had. And so I think it's an important week to really be thinking less about who you're playing and more about just you. I mean, it's always important to do that, but on a week like this, this goes back to our reaction thing a little bit. It's pretty human. It's consistent with human nature for college football players to look at an opponent like that and maybe not have the utmost respect like we would in Clemson. So we need to be focused on us.
Have you crafted exactly what that growth looks like in terms of what you want to see out of the team, out of each player? You don't have to answer that specifically.
We've thought a lot about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I think coaches are thinking a lot about it, just to focus on what that looks like.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So last week, for us, we really looked at it as this is just a measuring stick for us. You know, we're kind of playing ourselves here. The theme was like, let's set the bar. Like, let's throw a dart to the board and see what the standard looks like. And clearly it was just not good enough initially. So this week is kind of taking a step back to, let's get back to the foundation, to the basics. Let's do the little things better. Let's bring some attention to detail, and having a quality program, but an upset-minded program, sort of an underdog coming in who, again, has nothing to lose, right? Is going to thrive off of the environment that Autzen will create. You know, one way to, I guess, kind of eliminate the underdog is to just do the little things better than them. So that's the message this week.
Yeah, it goes by, you know, how we build our program is that quote by Carver, you do the common things in uncommon ways. To me, our response is going to be more about, you know, my default is Stockdale. You know, you face the brutal truth. Can you accept that? But if you stay stuck in that past, you know, that old adage, you don't want one game to beat you twice.
Yeah.
And for us, it was how do we come back to believe? And so part of this messaging for our players is to remember who they are, remember the work they put in, and find each one of those reasons to believe in them and believe in the team. And I think that's the messaging that we're going to go on, is you got to face the brutal truth. But forgiveness leads to freedom. I can't change it. I can't control it. And I don't want to keep holding on to the things that are going to hold me back. And so that's that possibility of not setting a limit. As you said earlier, Drew, that first game, you know, we lose this game 2 years ago, the season may be done.
Yeah.
And so we have every goal in front of us except win the opener. We didn't get that accomplished. But 4 of our 5 goals are still on the table, making sure we aren't setting limits and getting back to focusing on Clemson.
All right. Well, we'll be eager to see how it all plays out, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the way for all of us.
Yeah, I think a good reminder for our listeners here too, if you're interested in hearing our perspective on something related to college football and the work that we do, by all means, shoot us a message on social media, email us. We'll try to do some more of these over the course of the season.
Yeah.
Go Ducks.
Appreciate you. Go Ducks.